What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Monday afternoon. It's a victory Monday for the Florida State Seminoles. D-Lou, you were there in attendance for this one. Didn't get to get your take on it, nor VZ's. I was just solo dolo on it, but I was able to ramble for quite a bit, which I usually can do, as you guys make fun of me for doing. But whenever Florida State plays like they did against Wake, there was a lot to take away from it. So interested to get your thoughts on it. But we got a handful of things to discuss, including what if Florida State does end up winning out for the remainder of the season? What does that look like for Mike Norvell and the program moving forward? Also, Mike Norvell talked to the media today. He also talked about who QB2 is on this roster. He gave a pretty interesting answer there regarding that. We're going to talk a little bit of Clemson, as Mike was asked a few questions about Dabo Swinney and his squad. We've got a kickoff time for Florida State versus Virginia Tech in Doak. And then we got our sleeper picks that we're going to make later on. And then we're going to talk about a player who responded to one of my tweets regarding him and Mike Norvell, talking about Edwin Joseph, the situation that they had on the sideline at Stanford. And he gave a pretty good response back to my tweet about him having a good time on the sideline with his head coach in Norvell. But with me this afternoon is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. D-Lou, like I said, it's Victory Monday, and I would have to say, like I said in the instant, that was a dominating performance by the Seminoles Saturday night.
It's good to be back, especially after Florida State's first win in a while. And like you said, I mean, a dominating 42-7 performance against Wake Forest. And to me, I mean, it was pretty surprising to see Florida State come out there and handle a Wake Forest team that, like we had talked about, I mean, was on a 3-game winning streak, had just defeated an SMU team, which obviously upset Miami on Saturday as well, and got a good victory under their belt. Wake Forest seemed to be moving in the right direction at this point of the season, was only one game away from bowl eligibility, undefeated on the road. And then Florida State goes out there, smacks them in the mouth with one of its most dominant performances of the entire season. And funnily enough, I was looking back on it, and I was like, when's the last time Florida State scored 40-plus points against an ACC team? And coincidentally enough, it was against Wake Forest back in 2023, a 41-16 win on the road for Florida State. And Wake Forest in this game put up a season low 7 points, allowed a season high 42 points. Wacky performance, but Florida State, I mean, back to 500 on the season, and the path to bowl eligibility is right in front of them.
Mm-hmm. So, I brought this up Saturday night after the game, and all of us on here, it's Wake Forest. It's Wake Forest at the end of the day, and these are the type of wins that you are expecting out of Florida State just because they have so many more resources. The talent level is on a different level than what Wake Forest has. But in the last couple of years, outside of that 2023 game, Wake Forest has been a combative team with Florida State. And then, of course, what happened this year and last year, just not the greatest product on the field. And then you go up and you show up on Saturday night. And I think what I think stands out the most is that defensive side of the ball and the pressure that they were able to bring that we hadn't seen consistency enough from, at least from the inside, also to setting the edge on the outside. The defense came to play under Tony White on Saturday night.
Yeah, and it took a little bit. Wake Forest was able to get a couple quarterback runs on third down earlier in the game, but you would see the defense rise up and force the punt. And, Florida State able to build up that 14-0 lead on offense at halftime. And you came out, obviously went for it on the 4th and short around midfield. Florida State doesn't get it. And then Wake Forest is right there back in scoring position, hits a big play. They're close to the red zone. I know a penalty backed them back up. And then Florida State's able to get off the field with their first recovered fumble in over a year. And that leads then to Deuce Robinson's insane highlight catch, and Florida State going on to run Wake Forest out of the building. So I think you really have to give the defense credit in this one. Obviously, the struggles have been immense over the last 4 games, and to see them come out and play like that against Wake Forest early in that game, because, Florida State's offense, it took a little bit for them to get going. Punted on the first 2 drives, and then were able to finally get into the end zone. This was a scoreless game at the end of the first quarter, and then Florida State goes on a 42-0 run before Wake Forest finally gets a touchdown against the backups after recovering a fumble deep in Florida State territory. So the defense did its job.
One thing that got that offense going, D-Lou, which was really impressive, was Samuel Singleton, which we on this show like a lot. We've always liked the way that he's played since a true freshman, and sure enough, 91 yards, 6.5 average yards per carry. What a game from him. What were your thoughts? Because to me, Florida State doesn't have a home run guy in the running back room except for Samuel Singleton. And you could say, everybody alludes to, Jalen Lucas with his speed and twitchiness and such. But I think it's more a mix of, yes, he's very fast. He'll hit the hole quickly, but it's also to his vision, and he understands where he needs to go at the right time. And whenever he sees that coming together with his offensive line, I think he reads his offensive line very well, and is probably the best running back in that room to do so. Now, Gavin Sawchuk did not get the start in this game. It was actually Samuel Singleton. And, there was some questions asked from the media going into this game, what did you do during the bye week? And Mike Norvell said, they spent a lot of time looking at their personnel and making some switches that they feel like would be better for them to perform on the field offensively. And it was pretty interesting to see number 28 out there as the starting running back Saturday night. And sure enough, man, what a performance by him.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show the depth that Florida State has in that running back room. Because, you talked about a bunch of the other guys that have played really big roles for Florida State at running back to this point of the season. And, it was a little bit of a surprise maybe to see Samuel Singleton come out there, make his first career start against Wake Forest. But then you could tell very early on, okay, this kid has it. And, he's just so explosive. It was like the second he gets the ball and he's at the hole, he's already at the first down marker. He was moving quick. Like you said, very good vision. I thought the offensive line did a pretty solid job in the run blocking game. And man, what a performance for Singleton. Obviously rising up a little bit on the depth chart, and we'll see if that game, elevates him into an even bigger role for Florida State moving into these Final Four. Because obviously there have been some injury issues with Roy Dell and Cam Davis, but I think you see what Samuel Singleton was able to do in this last game, and obviously Sawchuk, Chroma have both been consistent playmakers for you throughout the season. Got a really strong nucleus there, and it's not guys that are necessarily, going to be gone from the program this year. Sawchuk, only a redshirt junior, Lucas, a redshirt junior as well. So, theoretically, you could have all these guys come back again in 2026 and maybe even be better than what they're looking like now.
Yeah, really impressive performance there. And still, Sawchuk gets 2 touchdowns on the ground in this game as well. But yeah, that was a great performance. I thought, too, Tommy played well. 12-16, 271 yards on air, touchdown with Deuce Robinson as well. But that one ball with that great shot to, I believe it was Mekhi Danzy. Yeah, it was in stride, and that's a track star. That's not easy to do. You have to build a lot of chemistry there because that dude is flat out fast. And I thought that was a gorgeous ball. It wasn't where Mekhi Danzy had to slow down, nor did he have to speed up. That was exactly on stride. And I thought that was a solid game from Tommy, who we were monitoring to see how healthy he was going to be going into this game, because that's something, at least in the lower part of his body, that he needed to get some time to recover. And, didn't have to use his legs and utilize his legs a whole ton in this game. I know Gus Malzahn tried to do a few things with him in that regard, I think off the first play actually of the game. But, Tommy was able to make it through safely through this one. And more importantly, I thought his arm was pretty good for the Seminoles as well.
Yeah, and, I wonder if maybe Florida State, we already knew this team had been pretty banged up over the last couple of weeks, but I wonder if they're even more or less healthy than they were letting on, because I really thought, not just Tommy, which, he looked a lot better after getting some time off and wasn't having any circumstances where he was limping around in the game like we had seen in some of the previous contests. And on both sides of the ball, I just thought Florida State looked a lot more explosive, a lot faster in this game. And they were back to that level of physicality that we saw in the first couple weeks of the season. So I wonder, if it really just came down to needing that week of rest to kind of recover a little bit. And then, we'll see if they're able to keep up the same intensity level moving into these Final Four regular season games. But like you said, Logan, a pretty good performance from Tommy Castellanos. It wasn't perfect. I'm sure he'd like to have a couple of those passes back. The one to Deuce down the seam where Deuce ended up taking a pretty big shot from a Wake Forest defender. And, I know Deuce was able to produce that wicked, left-handed catch reaching back across the Wake Forest defender. Tommy even said it, that probably wasn't his best football, but hey, it allowed Deuce to make a heck of a highlight. But, Tommy looked a lot more comfortable in this game than in recent weeks and able to connect on some of those big plays. Obviously, you mentioned the one to Mekhi Danzy late in the game, Danzy leading the country in 50-plus yard plays this season as a redshirt freshman. Then he's able to hit Deuce on that third down near the sideline, ends up being a 65-yard gain that leads to Florida State's first touchdown. So in the big circumstances, Tommy Castellanos rose to the occasion.
He sure did. He sure did. Yeah, Deuce Robinson, he's a true junior right now, and everybody's like, well, what about next season? Can we get Deuce Robinson back next season? That's going to be tough. That's going to be kind of like how you were in that, going into the 2023 season where you're hoping to get some of your biggest stars, your most productive guys back for another season and try to make some type of run. But Deuce Robinson's putting up some serious, ridiculous tape for NFL scouts out there. 148 yards, got this touchdown. And like you said, that big catch there. Had a defender draped on him literally and goes behind the back of the defender and is able to make a one-handed grab. And that he's done that plenty of times throughout this season. He is just an absolute playmaker for you. And I think it's even more impressive because right now, yes, you can try to, you can prepare for Mekhi Danzy and such. Squirrel White is no longer in your starting rotation. And you got Wayne McCoy out there as well. But defenses are going to predicate and make sure that they're putting coverage on Deuce Robinson. That is your biggest threat on air for Florida State. For Tommy Castellanos, that is his go-to guy in every game moving forward. But it's even more impressive that they were able to connect as much as they did. And that just goes to show, though, Tommy connecting with Deuce in this game, but also, too, Deuce being Deuce. Man, he's a ridiculous playmaker for you. I just don't know if you're going to have him going into 2026. Just appreciate what you have now, and they're going to need them big time this upcoming Saturday night. You need your biggest playmakers in some of your biggest games, and they're going to need them in Death Valley. And what will be, I know the Clemson Tigers aren't great this year. Did not have a great game this last Saturday. They let up a lot of points, but still, nonetheless, Dabo Swinney and this Clemson Tigers team will get them prepared for FSU like he always usually does.
And Deuce, I mean, he's having a heck of a year, man. Three games, breaking the century mark in receiving. Obviously, has had a couple of catches that are going to be on that highlight reel for him. And it's just so impressive to see that blend of size at 6'6" with, he's just so smooth as a receiver, and he's a really good athlete as well. I mean, he's a lot faster than some people think. Yeah. This guy's a good wide receiver, and we'll see if Florida State's able to keep him for 2026. I'm sure that would take a hefty investment for sure. But Deuce Robinson, I mean, he loves where he's at. Being home obviously is Seminole legacy, and FSU does have that on their side as far as trying to retain him.
Florida State needs more Jabril Rawls. If you could multiply some of those guys, that would be great. But Jabril Rawls is having a really good season, too, for Florida State. He's one that I think brings juice to this defense to wake everybody up a little bit. I thought Jerry Wilson, too. Man, Jerry Wilson, I was saying in the instant reaction, this man could lead the country in pick sixes if he could just grab onto the ball or not decide to absolutely blow someone up. And I don't mind somebody absolutely obliterating someone at all. Love that. That's why I love football, is because you get to legally absolutely destroy somebody and not get arrested for it. But I thought Jerry had probably a really good bounce back game for himself that he needed, certainly going into this weekend's game, because like I said, had that potential there for a pick six, which he's had a few times earlier this year, but also too, he had another chance as well if he just didn't want to hit that one wide receiver. But it was good to have Jerry Wilson bounce back when you have Jabril Rawls playing the way that he is as well. D-Lou, what were your thoughts on his play?
I thought really the entire defensive backfield brought it in this one for Florida State. Obviously getting Jabril Rawls back on the field after he missed the Stanford game due to an injury was huge. I think Jabril has arguably been your most consistent defender on this defense this year, outside of Earl Little Jr., who continues to lead the team in tackles. Did it again on Saturday with 7 of them, added his 4th pick of the season, which is the most by a Seminole defender since Jamie Robinson in 2021. And he had a forced fumble too, for good measure, Little Jr. And then you had Jerry getting in there with a forced fumble. Edwin Joseph had a forced fumble. So this defensive backfield, I mean, they were flying around and doing their job on Saturday night. I thought it was a really good bounce back performance, like you mentioned, by not just Jerry, but just by the entire unit.
Shaheem, I think, is playing very well too, because they're asking a lot out of him right now, and he is making some big time plays for you, and really in the red zone as well. But I mean, he's been a really good tackler for you, and I know they're sending him on some blitzes as well. But Shaheem has had a bounce back season for himself as well, since he's been having to step up with Ashton Barker going out earlier in the season.
He's been solid off the bench. I think ever since around that Virginia game, he's provided some good reps whenever he's gotten into the game. And then you've got Shamar Arnu, the true freshman out there at cornerback, getting some opportunities. So Florida State, not afraid to go deep into the bag in that secondary. I did think it was an up and down performance from the linebackers. There were a couple of times where there were some routes over the middle where the running back was able to leak out of the backfield wide open. Luckily, Robbie Ashford missed him a couple of times.
Yeah.
There was one play, fourth down for Wake on Florida State side of the field, and Ashford ended up throwing a deep shot to the left side of the field. But the running back, he had leaked out on the wheel, and if he would have looked over to his right, it's potentially a touchdown for Wake Forest. So I think there are still some things to clean up, but as far as the DBs, they performed a lot better on Saturday night.
They did, and then there was a comment in here, that helps when you have pressure there. Absolutely, that's something that affected there, and collapsing that pocket there for Wake, and the breaking news, and it's still, I still woke up and I couldn't believe it was true. D-Lou, I don't know if you noticed it. James Williams, sack,
half a sack.
Come on now, come on, baby, come on. Like I said, make sure you get your lottery tickets in and everything. The stars are aligning. James Williams got a sack. Everything's good in life. This is awesome. Maybe it can allude to one this upcoming Saturday up there in Death Valley. But like Stan said, bringing pressure to the quarterback is going to help a lot of those talented guys in the defensive backfield for you. That's just how it goes for defense. And two, it's very worth mentioning, and I did this in the instant, Wake Forest did not play a clean game at all.
No.
That was the most undisciplined. I had flashbacks to the Stanford game for Florida State. I was like, oh my goodness, at least it's happening on the other side of the ball to the opponent. But man, that was an ugly game. Missed out on a lot of opportunities as well. Yes, Florida State dominated there in the second half, but Wake Forest just continued to kill themselves, and was not a pretty game from the Demon Deacons at all.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can pull it up because, they had so many big plays that were taken away due to those penalties.
From them. 11 penalties for 93 yards. It's just, as FSU fans, you know exactly about that, just like how it was in Stanford for them. It was just, Wake Forest did not want to be out there as much, and that it's not taking away how Florida State played, but still, that it helps a lot when Wake played the way that they did.
Yeah, and you look at some of these, like a 20-yard run from Robbie Ashford on a 3rd and 5. Then Wake Forest picks up an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, gets pushed back. 25-yard run from Damon Claiborne, holding penalty, takes that away. 53-yard run from Claiborne up that right sideline in the first half, a holding penalty, takes that one away. So those were really the big ones that killed the Demon Deacons, because it did feel like they were able to create some stuff early on, and then you would just have the flag, and Wake Forest would be walking back. But after a couple drives, they were just out of rhythm from the penalties, and it just seemed like it killed their momentum in this game.
It did. Yeah, and everybody wanted the shutout. Absolutely. I know this defense wanted to. You could see how they were playing. They were playing with a lot of physicality and tenacity there at the very end. But, you see Brock Glenn go in, and, people are blaming Brock on that play for the fumble. Absolutely not. Lucas Simmons absolutely whiffed on that block off to the left side, and allowed for that defender to get back there and make that play on Brock Glenn, which eventually led into a touchdown for Wake Forest to end the dreams of a shutout there. But, we saw Brock Glenn go in there, and that will kind of transition me into a little bit of, what we heard from Mike Norvell today in just a second. I do want to bring up, though, because it's been a big topic after this win, and I'm interested to get your take on it, Dustin. What if Florida State does end up winning out? Because this Clemson team is not great. They are not a good football team this year. It is on the road, but Clemson has looked very suspect at home, which is rare for Dabo Swinney and his squad. And then you've got Virginia Tech, which is now a night game at home for FSU, which, as it should be, it should help you quite a bit. And then you go on the road at NC State. That's probably one that I mark out the most potentially. NC State getting a win this last weekend, and then the Florida Gators at the end of the season, which could either be a 3:30 kickoff or a 7 o'clock kickoff. I know we were talking about it earlier, D-Lo.
Yeah, a couple options, but that one's either going to be a an afternoon or an evening game. And, I don't personally think there's a high likelihood that Florida State is going to win out. I mean, obviously 3 of the next 4 games on the road, and this team has looked a lot different when they're not in Doak Campbell Stadium compared to when they are. I mean, those performances against Virginia and Stanford were just both very uncharacteristic, where I mean, you had a lot of bad penalties in both of those games for Florida State, and obviously, gave up 46 points defensively against Virginia, and then offensively against Stanford. Even though you put up all those yards, only 13 points on the board. So this team hasn't looked the same when they're outside of Tallahassee, and now they're going into the toughest environment they've played in all season in Death Valley. And even though Clemson, is 1-4 at home so far this season, I mean, that's a building that's always rocking, and it's tough to win up there. For Florida State. Clemson.
We were there in 2023 for that one, and that was a noon kickoff, and that was loud and very packed.
It was wild. It was a very loud game, probably the loudest game that I've ever attended. And they do have an outdoor press box, so that kind of helps you get involved in the noise a little bit. And NC State on a Friday night, that's one I'm definitely not looking forward to. And then Gainesville, I mean, it's pretty loud there as well, and they can bring it, especially in a rivalry game. So a tough road ahead for Florida State. This was always the part of the schedule when we were dissecting it that looked like the toughest stretch for the Seminoles. Maybe a little bit easier than it did a couple months ago, with the way Clemson has fallen off, began the season in the top 5, now unranked and 3-5, and, close to not being eligible for a bowl game. We'll see how the rest of the season goes for the Clemson Tigers. And Florida, obviously, with an interim head coach. Same thing with Virginia Tech. So the path may be a little bit easier than we thought whenever the season began on August 30th, but it'll still be a tough road for the Seminoles. I think with the way things are leaning so far, and, we've seen the administration publicly support Mike Norvell, as long as they can continue on a positive path, I think Mike Norvell is going to remain as the head coach in Tallahassee. And, I say that not only because of the money factor, but you continue to see other jobs opening up around the country. I don't think it's the deepest pool of candidates this year. And I mean, you'd be competing with a lot of other programs for just a couple of guys. So, it might be smart to wait and see how this thing goes to 2026.
Yeah, it's only just building. It's a snowball effect right now as we speak, because what just happened yesterday with Hugh Freeze over there with Hugh Freeze over there with the Auburn Tigers. Like, that's another big time job opening there, and the SEC also too in your region as well affects recruiting and everything. And Florida State would have to battle with a lot of that. And, with FSU, and we'll talk about it here, it seems like the players are really trying to fight for Mike. And I know there was some reports and chatter of things, and we had discussed it, but we hadn't heard anything to be able to confirm anything from sources or anything of losing the locker room, and then jokes being made at Stanford that was off of other reports and such. But it doesn't seem to be that case. And we'll talk about Edwin Joseph's comments here in just a minute. But it'd be very interesting if Florida State wins this out and finishes the season 8-4. That would be more. And it sucks because you lose to Stanford there, and you had all the hype after beating and dominating Alabama, which now is one of the top teams in the country. And then you lay an egg against Virginia, and then of course too against Stanford, and look awful. But then wouldn't it be just absolutely insanity that they go and they, finish the season 8-4, where all of us on here predicted this team. I mean, you and I predicted them to win 6 games. I think VZ predicted them to win 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's 8-4 though, D-Lou. And like you said, I don't think any of us on here expect for Florida State to move on from Mike Norvell before the season ends. But if he wins out, you do build momentum. You do build new momentum into this next season, which you will take that, and with the new staff and everything going on there. And you have the potential of bringing back a lot of really strong talent that has, some of them being really young, that have shown you starting caliber talent. And you can build a whole ton on that. And then if you could get into the transfer portal, that's chatter for a little bit of ways away. But it is a discussion and something to think about moving forward, because this team, if they do win out, it's an 8-4 team.
It would be a wild way to get there. That's for sure. I mean, it's been a weird season for Florida State, starting off beating Alabama, then the 4-game losing streak. And if they were able to turn it around and, defeated Wake Forest last week and able to win these next 4 and finish on a 5-game winning streak, I think you're just looking at it at the end of the regular season, like, how did we even get here?
I mean,
how did
that's
this
what I'm
happen?
wondering. Like, this poor FSU fan base, man, they don't know which side to pick on. And I think after that win on Saturday, I know it's Wake Forest, and I understand that. We all understand that. We know that. But for the fan base, it's like, which side can I actually pick on? Because if they do go on that 5-game winning streak and end the season the way they do, then it's like, oh, well, we're back on the Mike train there. And certainly if you can go into Gainesville and the Swamp, and no matter what, UF will play at a high caliber. And we've seen it before where they've had an interim head coach and they've beaten you in the Swamp a couple of years ago. Like, that's the thing that, Florida State has got to, still be able to handle business and such. And you still got NC State, like you had mentioned, who just beat and upset Georgia Tech 48-36 this last weekend. So you still have some battles ahead, but that's why it kind of makes it more impressive if you do win out. And definitely, I don't care. Clemson might not be good, but Dabo Swinney will set this team up to play you hard, and it's on the road, and it's a night game in Death Valley, which is not an easy place to play at all. So just something that I wanted to ask you to get your thoughts on, just to see, kind of where you stand on, moving forward for Florida State for the rest of this season.
We'll see. But, Florida State obviously didn't have a lot of expectations under its belt before the season started. I mean, no one was picking this team to be a top 25 opponent. No one was picking them to contend for an ACC championship. This was a year for Florida State to get back on track after that 2-10 campaign. And I think if Florida State would have lost to Alabama, a lot of fans would have been okay accepting, that 7-5 mark, that 8-4 mark, seeing progress back in the direction after last year. But when you beat Alabama, a top 10 team, and you beat them the way that Florida State did, everything changes. And you're like, well, hey, they just defeated one of the top teams in the country. Are we one of the top teams in the country? And then they come out and took care of business against the lower opponents, and then obviously laid an egg against Virginia, and it's kind of snowballed from there. But that win against Alabama, I mean, it made the expectations begin to rise again in Tallahassee. Maybe FSU just got a little bit ahead of itself.
Maybe so. We'll see. Got some big games ahead. We'll have a full preview for you guys on Wednesday for Florida State at Clemson. I'll be there for that one, so looking forward to it. Let's talk about this Mike Norvell presser today. Some of the takeaways from here. I don't know if you have some that you want to bring up, D-Lou, but I thought one that stood out to me was, talking about the quarterback 2 situation. Who is that? Because we did see Brock Glenn go over and be that QB2 in the game and go in. We did not see Kevin Sperry take any snaps. Now, it is very much worth noting that, Kevin Sperry's got, I believe, one more game left for his red shirt. You only get 4 in a regular season. Mike Norvell was talking about that today. He did not want to name who his QB2 was. He wasn't going to name that, but he practically was alluding that it's most likely probably to be safe with that redshirt option. That's why you did see Brock Glenn in there on Saturday evening against Wake.
Yeah, it seems like that's really the case in this scenario for Florida State. Mike Norvell didn't want to come out and flat out say true freshman Kevin Sperry is ahead of redshirt sophomore Brock Glenn on the depth chart. But we all saw what happened when Florida State had to put in a different quarterback in an important scenario on the road against Stanford after Tommy was injured. And it was the true freshman they rolled with over the guy who's in his year 3 at Florida State. And obviously, Brock Glenn has dealt with some injuries this season and was limited some back in the spring and in fall camp. But Kevin Sperry has really taken that opportunity and run with it. And, I think Florida State, they're trying to protect that red shirt at the moment. But if there is a scenario where they have to put in a different guy and, the game is on the line or something of that nature, I think they'll be rolling with Kevin Sperry.
Mike also mentioned a few things of, what it will take to go up there and beat Clemson, and gave a lot of respect to Dabo Swinney and his coaching staff. And, said, that their defense isn't playing to its uncharacteristic how they played this last game, of course, but said the offense was able to put up a lot of points like they had expected for this offense to play with Cade Klubnik all throughout this season. When talking about it throughout the preseason, this Clemson squad has a lot of talent there, so he gave his respects there and such. He also mentioned too, we did not hear from Gus Malzahn I believe that would have been yesterday. He's dealing with the family situation there. He did mention, though, Gus Malzahn will be back tomorrow morning for their practice there, and it should not mess with anything going into the game plan and, all that kind of stuff and practices. So our thoughts too and prayers and everything there with the Malzahn family as they're dealing with the situation there with one of their family members. But Gus Malzahn back to practice tomorrow morning. And also, too, we got news that Florida State versus Virginia Tech will be at 7:30 on the ACC network. Another night game in Doak Campbell Stadium for the Seminoles. D-Lou, they love those night games. That's how it usually goes here. Got to get those night games in. And so happens to be on the ACC network. Yippee, yippee, you do it all. Yippee day.
Yeah, mixed reviews for me. I'm sure Florida State fans are happy with the night game, but there's a massive UFC card that night, and of course, gonna have to miss it again.
Yeah.
Same thing happened back for the Miami game too, I believe, which we saw how that one unfolded on the field. But yeah, I mean, this will be the last game for Florida State in Doak Campbell Stadium in 2025. I thought the atmosphere for the Wake Forest game for homecoming for the annual Seminole Heritage game were excellent. I really didn't know what to expect from the fan base going into Saturday night. The fans that did show up were proud. They were loud. They brought a lot of positive energy to the stadium. And there were more people there than I thought. It ended up filling in a little bit after kickoff, maybe not a total sellout. I think some of the students were still enjoying the Halloween festivities from the night before that probably lingered into Saturday. But regardless, I mean, a ton of fans there. And then, I mean, my favorite part of the whole game was the fourth quarter where you had a bunch of Florida State fans rushing up to the very top of sections 104 and 105 and waving their T-shirts. I mean, that was hilarious. And I was watching it when there were like 25 people up there, and then you just see the flood of thousands of people trying to run up the stairs to get involved into it. So the Oklahoma State meme made its way to Tallahassee. I'm hoping we see it again against Virginia Tech. Might be cold out there, though.
Yeah, it might be a little chilly, but those boys, as long as there's some brewskis nearby, they'll be just fine. And definitely when they have the performance like FSU did. Here's a look at the depth chart from this week's biggest notable thing here is Samuel Singleton moving up here and taking a spot there with Gavin Sawchuk at the or position. And it'll be very interesting to me, D-Lou, if he gets that start. I would not be shocked whatsoever because Clemson's defense, the way that they played this last weekend, you want some explosive plays being made on the ground. Boom. Samuel Singleton showed that he can do that against Wake, and you'd like to see that consistency continued there. Anything else to you on this depth chart that's worth noting?
Yeah, the only other change that Florida State made this week is they added Stephon Thompson back in there as the co-starter with Omar Graham Jr. at the Jack linebacker spot. Thompson was injured, and Florida State's loss to Pittsburgh, had to exit that game relatively early. Was out against Stanford, missed the game against Wake Forest this past weekend, but with him being back on the depth chart, it seems like he's trending towards a return against Clemson, which would be huge. I mean, he's been a solid producer for Florida State in that linebacker room to this point of the season, has the most experience in this defensive scheme under Tony White of anyone in that linebacker room by far. So I think his presence on the road in a tough environment could be important for that position group.
100%. It certainly could. But yeah, we'll talk about it more on Wednesday when we do preview that game with Clemson. But I'm very intrigued to see if they get someone else more involved there in the wide receiver room. I think someone else is going to stand out in that game. Deuce Robinson is Deuce Robinson, man, but it would be great to see LaWayne McCoy get there. I think Squirrel White had one target in the game against Wake Forest. He was out there.
One catch, one target, 0 yards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's. I mean, Deuce is still being Deuce, but it would be nice to be able to, share some things around and get get someone else involved there in the wide receiver room. And we did see Randy Pittman there in the receiving game a little bit. Of course, we did see that, but just some more guys out there, some more weapons would certainly help out against Clemson. But it's time to make some picks, D-Lo. we got to make some picks. We actually won our last pick show. Remember that? We actually won one. We're back in the win column on Sleeper.
We
Shout
won?
out to our, yeah, we won. We won. We went 4 for 4 over there on our picks. You want to see them? Here they are. We had Tua, 150 plus. Zay Flowers, 50 plus. Lamar Jackson, 200 plus. Woo, just got there close. And then A-Chain had a good game as well, 50 plus in the rushing department.
I'm shocked. I did not realize that.
Yeah, y'all sent a text to me, and I was like, y'all say I blame. You're like, I blame Logan. I was like, what am I getting blamed for? What am I getting blamed for? We just won our bets. And nobody texted me back. I'm like, what did I do wrong? But anyway, shout out to Sleeper. Let's make some picks real quick. D-Lou, we got Monday Night Football between the Dallas Cowboys and the Cardinals. Now, is Trey Benson hurt?
He's still out, yeah.
Dang. God, man, that running back room is hurting because James Conner's been out for the season with Achilles injury.
Yeah, Benson's still on IR. He's eligible to return next week. I think next Sunday would mark his 5th week out. So he's would have had about 5 weeks to recover from that meniscus injury. Seems kind of, I was reading some stuff about the Cardinals last night. Seems kind of up in the air if he will be back next Sunday. Hasn't been able to practice yet, apparently.
Uh-oh. Okay. Dang, that stinks. It would have been great to see him on Monday Night Football. But still, nonetheless, though, Dak Prescott has been having a really strong year. Looking at these stats over here, I think we trim it maybe a little bit. I have not been able to look at the stats for Arizona's defensive passing game. But, you know, with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb and Ferguson, I mean, they have just such a lethal passing attack. I'd say 225 is a nice safe bet there for Dak on Monday Night Football.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, and it's hot right now. It's trending in that direction. Us trimming right now has helped, and we're just trying to get in the win column, man. That's all we're trying to do because, you know, we're not throwing a crazy amount of cash on these, but other people can. And as long as we get them locks, that's what we're here to do. We're trying to get people locks here on these sleeper picks. But we're going to go with 225 plus and the passing yards with more over there for Dak. And like I said, down below, guys, if you want for your first deposit, you get a 100% match up to $100. Use code Knowles down below. So much is Javonte? 64.5. I want to look at his stats real quick. Why don't we trim him down to 50? Why don't we just keep trimming, huh? Why don't we go to the barber shop, right? I mean, that's not bad. 1.23 times on the 50 plus.
I would even take 40.
I don't even want just 0.06 more. I think he gets 50. I don't know how good Arizona's defensive rushing game is. Stats. Let's see. Well, let's see. Bang, bang, bang. They're saying it's a strong fantasy option, but we need our sleeper picks. I think that's not too bad. But we got to see. Hold on. Where is George Pickens? 64. CD though, 81.5.
What's Ferguson at?
Ferguson is at 40.5.
Man, he had 0 catches last game. He's on my fantasy team, so he absolutely killed me.
So yeah, you learned the hard way.
He had been playing well before that.
Yeah. What about touchdowns? Is let's see. I was looking at Pickens for touchdowns, but I had to get on my phone to probably go look for that because I can't swipe over there.
McBride, 69.5.
69.5. That's the. Oops. Let me just go to stats. No, that's not what I want. I want this. There we go. Could trim him. Could trim him to 50.
Yeah, that feels more likely.
That's not bad. There's 3
And
good picks.
Cowboys do have a bad defense.
Yeah, they've not been playing well this season at all.
Arizona, Jacoby Brissett starting tonight. Brissett.
You say Brisket? Did you just say Brisket?
Brisket.
No, you said Brissett at first. No. Instead of Jacoby Brissett, it's Brissett. You just want brisket. That's what you want.
Well, let's go back to your Hugh Freeze pronunciation.
Yeah, well, that was earlier, and it's too much caffeine. You know what I'm saying? All right, so if we do, I mean, this is not we don't have a juice. Oh, come on, hold on, real quick. You want to put Pickens in there for a touchdown?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go over here and put him on there for us. He's been making
plays.
Yeah, no, he's been an absolute animal. Sucks that he left my Steelers, but we just beat the best team in the NFL this last weekend. So I don't feel so bad. Go Steelers. Anyways, George Pickens. Woo, yeah, no, that's a juicer right there for us. That is a 2 times in the more selection. If we did $5, do 5 for 16.30. So we got Dak Prescott, 225 plus in the passing yards. We've got Javonte Williams also shaved down to 50 plus in rushing yards. McBride 50 plus, and then we got George Pickens anytime touchdown. Shout out to Sleeper. Thanks as always for partnering with us on Hear the Spear this football season. Use promo code Noles and you'll get $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Shout out to those guys. We deeply appreciate it. And we were in the win column, so everything's heading in the right direction. But hopefully we'll get in there as well tonight. All right, D-Lou. One last thing I wanted to bring up to you was a tweet from Edwin Joseph. So I put out a post, and I thought it was something that stood out to me in the game whenever Florida State was facing Wake this weekend, and that defense was making plays all across the board. Earl Little Jr. got his interception. And during that, we also saw the entire defensive side of the ball go over to Mike Norvell and celebrate with him, as you can see in this photo right here. And Edwin Joseph was right here. And we know, the situation that was had. And this is football. It's not like something that, oh, my goodness, they got very vocal on the sideline. And Mike Norvell was not happy with Edwin Joseph after a mistake that he had made against Stanford. It's football. Things like that are going to happen on a sideline. But I thought it was, one thing that was talked about this entire week going into the game was, is this team going to fight for Mike? And, we were hearing things about the practices going well and the energy was high. And then you see this and Doak and, the entire team going over and celebrating with Mike. So I took a screenshot of that. I tweeted it. And then actually Edwin Joseph responded to this tweet and said, he pushes me the hardest because of the love we got for each other. He truly cares about us and not the number on our jersey. My emotions ran high before, but it doesn't represent that last name on the back of my jersey and the respect I grew up on. Learn and grow. That was a great response there from Edwin. And, all of us, we can discuss things and whatever, blah, 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 on a show or on Twitter, social media. But what happens in that locker room happens in that locker room, and we're not there in that locker room. And I think it was very apparent pretty early on in that game that this team is still ready to fight for their head coach. And like I said too, whenever Tommy put up that post about Mike Norvell on his Instagram story, that was a full message sent to, I think, the rest of this fan base and to the rest of that roster as well.
You don't follow Edwin on Twitter?
I did. I thought I did. I followed him. Well, I did follow him. Well, I did follow him last night, I thought. Here's the deal. I actually did not see him quote that tweet until I saw another outlet. I think it was Blostein from 247 respond. This is a nice and mature response there from Edwin. I was like, wait a second. That was my tweet that he responded to. So I didn't even see that happen until then. But shout out Edwin Joseph. There's a follow there.
Yeah, I think from the outside looking in, obviously a situation as tense as that, where it's a national TV game, Florida State, they're having their struggles against Stanford. And then you see on the sideline, the head coach of the team and a player on the team having words with one another, not looking happy with one another. I think people can take that scenario and just kind of run with it and paint whatever picture that they want. And Mike Norvell, he even talked about it going into the bye week, addressing that situation with Edwin Joseph. And he pointed back to a time in 2022 where Florida State was on the road, uh, beating the heck out of Miami, go on to win that game 45-3 in South Florida. And at one point late in the blowout, Deuce Spann made a mistake, and there was a very heated conversation between the two. And Mike Norvell let Deuce Spann know about the standard on the sideline with all the cameras pointed on him. But considering the result of that game, it was made into a positive moment, and Mike Norvell trying to enforce the standard of Florida State, even though the game was well out of reach for Miami at that point, and holding everybody accountable. Whereas this time, you see it with Edwin Joseph, and they're like, well, this means he's lost the team and the team isn't fighting for him. So, I think anyone, like I said, anyone from the outside can paint a picture. But as we saw from this team on Saturday night, I mean, they're still fighting for each other. They're still out there playing for Mike Norvell. And it wasn't just Tommy. I mean, Earl Little Jr., Jabril Rawls, Deuce Robinson, the 4 players we were able to speak with post-game, they all had very encouraging words for Mike Norvell and made it clear that they're backing him, they're supporting him, and they're going to keep trying to get it done for him.
You had taken a video in pregame warmups of the team, huddling around Tommy Castellanos, who gave a pretty lengthy speech. I think they had a prayer too before the game, but also spoke with the team before that game began. And, I think this team certainly does rally around a leader like Tommy Castellanos, who puts his body on the line, like we just saw a couple weeks ago against Stanford. But still here, this is what Tommy had to say after the game. He says, "I hate all the fire Norvell. Nah, Coach Norvell has been absolutely awesome and everything and more for us. I know you guys don't see that, and I know they don't see that. Everyone blames the coaches. That's on us. Those 4 games have been on us. We've been put in a position to execute and win those games, and we didn't. So it is not on him. That's on us. Tonight we showed up, and I'm glad that we got that done for him. It's new November, fresh start. I told the guys today, new November, 1-0, fresh start of the season. We are going week in and week out. We are going to continue to play great football and continuing to keep fighting for the community, the logo, the fans, and for Coach." So very strong statement there from Tommy. And like you were saying earlier, a lot of those other players that y'all spoke with, they're backing their head coach. And, I think that's great to see. Of course, yes, that is Mike Norvell's team. And whenever you go out there and you don't win, that is on, that's on your coach. But to see your players stepping up and, speaking and, trying to put that blame on themselves, it just kind of goes to show how much they truly do, like playing for Mike Norvell. That's the one thing, I think all of us, and, I've had my chance, whenever I was still, in Tallahassee, being at those practices and, practically working there, getting interviews with Mike, and he treated us very fairly and such. And across the administration, this administration really likes Mike. A lot of the big boosters like Mike. A lot of the people with a lot of money like Mike personally. He's a good man, good family man as well. It's just what the product is on the field isn't at the standard of Florida State. That's what absolutely is crushing to a lot of this fan base, and of course the higher ups that have to make a pretty big decision at the end of the season on where the future lies with Mike Norvell at Florida State. He's a very liked guy, though, and that's just kind of the case it is. And you can tell with a lot of these former guys, a lot of these former players coming in here and wanting to be around the program, be around Mike Norvell, and a lot of them in the NFL now, trying to support and show their support for Mike. I think a lot of these things do stand out to me, off the field. And I noticed that going into this game a lot. And that's why I predicted Florida State to win that game. I felt like there was something being sent from QB1. And I think there was trying to send a message, and this team played for Norvell and executed as they should have against Wake Forest.
Yeah, clearly I was way off in my prediction, but I think I'm going to be rolling with the reverse jinxes from here on out. Maybe that'll help. It's been a rough stretch of game predictions for me. Yeah. But, at the end of the day, it's a results-based business. And Florida State, it's a program with a long history of success. I mean, a lot of tradition. And there's a standard that fans want to see this program reach every single year, no matter the circumstance, no matter who's on the team, no matter who's coaching. They just expect that out of Florida State, and hasn't been there consistently enough during Mike Norvell's tenure. But like you said, Logan, I mean, he's a very likable guy. It feels like he goes about this process the right way, and he truly does care about everyone within that program, not just for their success on the football field, but for their success away from it. And I think you can say, if Florida State had hired Brian Kelly, he wouldn't have made it as far as Mike Norvell if the results had been the same. Not a very likable guy. But
No.
Norvell has won some people over within this program, and I think there's still a confidence that he can get this thing going back in the right direction. And, obviously that's going to take some more success on the recruiting trail for Florida State. So we'll see if they're able to stack up some of these wins, end off this 2026 recruiting cycle on the right note, and then once again find some good fits in the transfer portal.
100%. Well, guys, we'll be back live for you guys on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. We'll be previewing Florida State at Clemson, which is always a big game, no matter what, year in and year out. And the Seminoles have a big test. They've now looked good on the road this season. They've got to bounce things back and play and perform like they did at home against Wake Forest this last weekend. But that's going to do it for us. If you're still with us on YouTube, consider hitting that like button down below. We deeply appreciate it. It helps go out to more FSU fans to get you guys in here with some questions and topics. And also, too, if you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button down below. We go live 3 times a week, always with an instant reaction after every game. We preview games on Wednesdays for you and take care of all the quick hitters and the big topics and injury updates. And then Monday, D-Lou and I are on with you guys right after Mike Norvell's pressers. But that's going to do it for us. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week, and we will see you guys later on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.